Welcome back to episode 2 of Book Club Babble and Brew. My name is Jennifer Aline. I am a freelance writer, the mother of twin girls, and my debut novel, That Age, is coming out hopefully before the end of 2020. Today we are talking about some books that I read / listened to over the last month, I believe. Maybe it's a little over a month since I did my first episode of this. But today we are going to talk about SAGA, which is a comic book series or a graphic novel that I finally finished. We're also going to talk about Jenna Moreci's The Savior's Champion and another audiobook I listened to, which was The Vanishing by Bennett. So let's get to it. We're going to start off with SAGA, which I will admit that only until the last few years have I really gotten into comic books or graphic novels. I just find them fascinating. There's also a really awesome bubble tea and comic book store down the street, and I kind of love it. So I felt like I just had to jump into this new world. And SAGA was the first longer book that I read. I had read a bunch of, smaller comics that were like teeny tiny, the paper kind that a lot of people know about. It's a space opera fantasy kind of story. I looked on, some of the sites talking about SAGA. Some people said it was kind of Star Wars meets Game of Thrones, and honestly, it kind of is. The storyline goes on about, they're out in space with all these different planets, and they're kind of aliens in a way. They're all these different creatures, and all these planets and all these realms are kind of at war. And these two creatures from not the same team decide to meet up, and if you can't tell, they have a baby. So I'm not going to get into much more because I'm not in the mood for spoilers. But I do want to say this was a really enjoyable, interesting read. It was easy. I've had this probably for about 6 months now, honestly, since like Christmas. And I just slowly got through it. But the past few weeks, I got right to the end. It was just interesting. And when you just need an escape, especially during this time of quarantine and COVID and chaos, it's nice to kind of escape to something different. I tend to read a lot of women's fiction, chick lit, my fantasy novels that I love, but something with pictures and just a whole different dynamic is definitely a good sense of escape. The only con that I really have about this story is that sometimes the details would confuse me. All the different, planets, all the different battles going on. That was sometimes a little confusing. I found myself looking back and rereading certain pages just so I understood, why they were battling or who these different groups were. Because in fantasy, if it's a story similar to this, there's a lot going on. I mean, they compare it to Game of Thrones on a Star Wars level. That's a lot. That was probably the main really confusing part, but everything else was just enjoyable. It's dark, it's deep, it's dirty. So it's definitely not for children or teens. There's a lot going on in here, and I'm really excited because this is only volume 1. I'm excited to read volume 2 and 3 and 4. I think there's 9. We are going to move right along to the first audiobook that I think in our last episode I'd started listening to, and that is Jenna Moreci's The Savior's Champion. And I have to say, I honestly don't have anything really negative to say about this story. It was well written. The characters were so interesting and diverse. I love how she included so much diversity. She included different sexualities. She included different cultures. Not everybody was white with blonde hair. There were people who were black, people who were Asian, just lots of different looks. Somebody who is paralyzed is in it. Different people all in one book, and it makes me very happy. So Jenna Moreci, good work. That the story, it's a fantasy, and I'll give you a little overview. It's about this realm, this kingdom where Ever is born, and it's a woman. And at her 20th birthday, Thorne's tournament happens, which means the men in the community who want to try to battle for the Savior's heart, they get to, and it's quite a battle. there is a lot more in this than a love story. Let me tell you, the love story was extremely enjoyable. I will say I love the love story, but there's a twist in it that I will say I kind of started catching on to, but half of that is because I follow Jenna Moreci on Instagram and I kind of looked too much on it. So that's partially my fault. But there is a really unique twist that makes me so excited for her next book, The Savior's Sister, which is coming out, I believe, this fall. I already pre-ordered it for like a book copy. I want to read that thing. I am so excited. So if you're somebody who enjoys fantasy, enjoys romance, enjoys blood, battle, and gore, read The Savior's Champion. It's, you know, if I compared it to some other books, I would probably also compare it to a Game of Thrones. I'd compare it, I don't know. It's honestly in a whole just series of its own, and I love that about her. And the fact that she's an indie author and she is her own business and she's her own just unique person and she has an author tube, it makes me admire her even more as a writer. So The Savior's Champion was an amazing, amazing read. Listen. It was an amazing listen. We're going to talk about the second audiobook that I listened to this past month. It has been quite a busy month. I have done some traveling finally to visit family, and just there's been a lot going on. So I've been listening to Audible quite often. The second book I listened to was Bennett's The Vanishing Half. And actually HBO, I believe, just signed a contract with her to make it into a series. But I decided that during the Black Lives Movement, when it really hit home and started with the riots and all of that chaos, I wanted to support a whole bunch of Black authors and Black creators. So I purchased a couple books, and one of the books that I purchased was The Vanishing Half by Bennett. And starting off this listen, I will say I had a hard time connecting. And I realize why the Black Lives Matter movement is so important. I love people. I don't care if you're Black, I don't care if you're Asian, I don't care if you're gay, I don't care if you're trans, I don't care. If you're a good person, I like you. I don't care how you look. That's just how I am. I've always been a very accepting person. So going into this, I thought immediately I'd connect, but I had a hard time connect because I have not really grown up in a similar culture as the story. And I've realized in the past, if I didn't connect to the story immediately, I would push the book aside, which is not fair. And just because I'm a white girl and I don't connect with the Black culture doesn't mean that I shouldn't finish the story. I want to learn about it and understand this whole world a little bit more. And just because I love humans doesn't mean that I fully understand everybody. So right away, I realized I need to listen to this story. And I'm glad I did, because it was a great story. It is about this little teeny tiny town in the South that is filled with people who are very light-skinned Black people. They look down on people who are darker. And these two twins are born who are very light-skinned. The mom is mulatto and the dad is white. And one of the twins, they grow up, they run away. This is kind of in the beginning of the story. They run away, and one of them comes back with a very, very dark daughter. The other one decides to live her life as a white woman. And it just shows culture. It shows so much diversity and how we don't understand this world as much as we want to and we think we do. And I learned a lot in this story. Involves relationships that have trans dynamics in there and gay, and it talks about different, SES. It has a lot of really important dynamics that we all need to learn about. A good story. Honestly, it was really mostly like this. It was a story. It told you a story. I was kind of at the end waiting for the climax at the end to get a really big moment. There wasn't that much of a moment, but that didn't make it not a good book. I'm very happy I listened to this book, and I'm excited for HBO. I want to watch this as well. It was a learning experience. The book was an experience, a story. It opened your eyes to a lot of different elements in this world that we have pushed aside, and this was a great, timely story for what's going on now. I needed this, and I think a lot of us need this. So the only downfall from this story, like I said, is that it kind of was a constant. I didn't really get that end point that a lot of stories have, but that doesn't make it a bad book. It was a story, it was an experience, and I'm so glad I listened to it. Those were the books I read and listened to over the past month. If you have any comments, please comment below. I know that I just said a lot when it comes to race and diversity that you may not agree with, but you may have thoughts about it, and please open up and express your thoughts. Right now I am reading Jennifer Weiner's Big Summer. I should have that done in the next couple of weeks, so the next one I'll talk about that. I'm also listening to The Hating Game by Sally Thorne right now on Audible, which is my current audiobook, and I will talk about those in the next video. So thank you guys very much for sticking around and listening to me babble about some books with my brew. If you like this kind of stuff, subscribe below, hit the thumbs up button. I post this lovely little video special every few-ish weeks. So stay creative, stay reading or listening, and drink that coffee. The brew.